This video is brought to you by today's sponsor, Emma Sleep. So you may not be aware, but we are kind of in the midst of a Twilight renaissance that's been going on for about 2 years now. And that's due to 3 reasons. The first being that the saga was brought onto Netflix's streaming platform. That being the most popular streaming platform, more people now had access to the movies. The second being that it came onto the platform during the height of the COVID pandemic, where most people were in lockdown, spending a lot of time at home and not really having much to do. What do people do when they're bored? They watch TV. Now, what better movies to watch than movies set in the forest about mystical, sparkly vampires, a romantic love story that's life or death? It's just a really great escape from the shitty reality that we were living in. So they really popped off. And a third reason being that TikTok now exists where it didn't when Twilight was first introduced. So on TikTok, Twilight really popped off in certain areas. A lot of people were giving Bella core, where they were dressing like Bella Swan. Not sure why, because she dresses really, really boring. There was also the cute little edits on Twilight. There was Twilight facts, Twilight parodies. It was all there. It was lovely. So we had these 3 main reasons bringing Twilight back into our midst. And that really affected me too. The other night I saw Twilight on Netflix and I was like, you know what, let me give it a go. It's been so long. And I watched it and oh my god, was I swept away. The magic of it all, the mysticism, the beauty, the otherworldliness of it all. So lo and behold, I binged all 5 movies in 5 days. And it was an amazing ethereal experience and I'm sad it's over. Not really, because I'm kind of reliving it with you guys. And that's what we're gonna get into today. But before we do, if you're new here, I'm Luke. Welcome to my channel. On my channel over here, I post commentary, critique, and reaction videos on basically anything that I want. I have a really mix of content ranging from like celebrities, pop culture, movies and TV shows, social media, the whole kit and caboodle. So really click that little subscribe button, turn on the bell, lots to come. Because I'm about to be doing a whole series on the Twilight saga. When I watched these movies, this experience was so amazing, I knew I had to do videos on it. But I couldn't really do a rewatch because Netflix would just copyright it. So I thought, what can I do? I'm going to be doing like a walkthrough of the movie. But I'm going to be like pointing out things that you may have missed or giving my opinion on things that I think are weird or cringy or interesting. We're going to be giving commentary to its peak, giving insight into what really went on in the Twilight series. If you pay a lot of attention, you just might notice some things that you didn't notice before, and I'm here to bring those to the surface. So without further ado, let's get into it because I'm about to dive into Twilight. So the movie opens up with a scene of a deer strolling through the woods with Bella, our protagonist, doing a voiceover where she talks about how she had never given much thought to how she would die. But dying in the place of someone she loves seemed like a good way to go. Now, here's my first issue with characters who have this martyr complex where they feel like they have to like die for their family or die for people. Like, come on, I just feel like you are a teenager. Why would you die for your mother who's double your age and has lived more of a life than you? Like, I'm sure your mother would be really pissed if you did that and she would just want you to actually live a young, healthy life. Bella is telling us that she's willing to die for the people she loves. So she's a ride or die kind of bitch. Good to know. So in the woods, we see this Bambi running around. It's getting chased by something. Ooh, what is it? You can kind of make out that it's Edward, but he looks ridiculous. He looks like that picture of Robert Pattinson where he's standing in the jumpsuit. We see Bella is in a very different environment to what we will come to know. She's in Arizona, the complete opposite of Forks. She's holding this little cactus. Now this cactus is a paid actor, and I want you to know that. She's in the desert. You have like the warm tones and you have this landscape of these mountains, and then it just boom goes to Twilight and it's like the trees, the forest, and we get that blue filter. She has this blue filter over the whole movie, and normally I'm like not really a fan of filters in movies. If you do it right, it can be done amazing to the point where it doesn't even feel like it was in this world. So Bella's in the car with her dad Charlie, who she hasn't really seen in a couple years. Their relationship is a bit disconnected. I, on the other hand, love Daddy Charlie. But here she is with that cactus again. Paid actor, I hope it's still getting its royalties. Next up, she meets Jacob. Now Jacob is obviously a very important character. He introduces himself by saying, "Hi, I'm Jacob. We used to make mud pies together when we were little." You're really friend-zoning yourself right there. You know what I mean? Like the fact that you think that you had a chance just proves that someone ain't clicking up there. Charlie actually bought Bella a car as a homecoming gift. I've never been bought a car before. Yes, the car is a piece of shit that probably can't even run properly and it's falling apart, but it's the thought that counts. She gets in the car, she hits Jacob as he's walking past. It's very evident that Bella is clumsy, and we will see that throughout the rest of the series until a certain point. Now, at Forks High, she pulls in that old pickup truck. There's all these kids with their nice cars. They're laughing at her. I feel like if you've ever been a new student at a school, which I have, you kind of relate to this feeling of feeling like an outsider. And I think Catherine Hardwicke painted that picture very well. So she gets introduced to Eric. He says, "If you need a shoulder to cry on, you can come to me." And she says, "I'm more of a suffer in silence type." She's kind of funny sometimes. So Bella's playing volleyball, and you can really tell that she doesn't know what she's doing. She's kind of uncomfortable in her own body. She doesn't want to be there. And she proceeds proceeds to hit the ball into Mike Newton's head. At first it's kind of like, whoa, but then he sees who it is and he's like, damn, you can hit me any day you want. And he said, you're Isabella, right? Just Bella. So then we meet Jessica, who's played by the now famous Anna Kendrick. So then Bella goes to the lunch table with these friends. I'm happy she's made friends, however, like, they're not really the best. The guys are like, you know, arguing over her, saying that she's their homegirl. And then one of the guys comes and kisses her and runs away, which like literally is assault. I know he just picked her on the cheek, but like, come on. And it's just weird how they're actually treating her. And Jessica acknowledges the saying, it's like first grade, they're treating her like she's a shiny new toy. And then the moment arrives. These people start walking outside the cafeteria. And Bella's like, who are they? And they're like, the Cullens. So Jessica says that the Cullens recently moved from Alaska, with Dr. Cullen being the foster father of 5 children. Meanwhile, do they know that they are senior citizens? They've well past their 100th birthday. They've gotten a letter from the Queen. Oh. Never mind. And Jessica's introducing them. Here's Rosalie, here's Emmett, and she's kind of talking about how they're like together and she's not even sure if that's legal. And then Angela's like, they're not related, and Jessica's like, but they live under the same house. It's like weird. So we move on to Alice and Jasper. She describes Jasper as the one who looks like he's in pain. And then Bella asks, who's he? And this, you guys, this is why I love Twilight the most out of all the movies, because we get to see the introduction of Bella and Edward. We get to see that weird friendship, that hate to love sort of vibe, and we get to see the journey of them coming together. The rest of the movies they're together, except for New Moon, where Edward breaks her heart and leaves her, but you know, we'll talk about that in the next video. But I just really love movies about watching people fall in love. Watching movies about people who are already in love, it's not as interesting. So Edward walks in, and that hair, oh. And Jessica says that's Edward Cullen. He's totally gorgeous, obviously. But apparently no one's good enough for him. And then Edward kind of smiles because he's a vampire and he's listening. He's always listening. So they kind of like stare at each other for a bit. When he's first looking at her, he looks at her like in kind of a disgust or confusion. And that's because we later find out that he can't read her thoughts, even though he can do that to anyone else. Reading people's thoughts, it seems cool in theory, but I would actually hate it. And then she walks into her classroom and there's the fan behind her and it blows her scent to Edward and he loses his shit. Robert Pattinson really took it to the next level with his acting here. He pulled some serious faces. Kristen was like, what's going on here? She smells her hair because she thinks that she stinks. Meanwhile, she probably smells fine, but she has no idea why he's reacting this way. He's like this the entire class, constantly just like looking like he can't even breathe. He gives her an awful look. She's like, what the fuck is going on? But yeah, he just has a bit of a staring contest with her and then he leaves before the bell even rings. And then she walks into this area like the office and Edward is trying to change classes, but he can't because all the other classes are already full. And he's like, I guess I'll just have to endure it. Which like, motherfucker, that is so mean. And also like, what do you expect her to think? Like, at this point, she doesn't know what vampires are, so she doesn't know why you're reacting this way towards her. She's innocent, she's done nothing wrong, and you're treating her like garbage, saying you'll have to endure it. I just think it's kind of funny, low-key, though, how at this point, what was running through Bella's head? Was she just thinking that she smelled really bad, and that's why he couldn't sit next to her, so he wanted to change classes because of it? Because that's like a joke. And then we get a classic Bella lip bite. She does this a lot. She's super pissed. She's like, what the hell's going on? So then she goes to school saying she wants to confront Edward, but then he doesn't show up. And he doesn't show up for days. The rest of the Cullens do, but Edward is nowhere to be seen. And she's confusion. So then we get the scene of this guy running through this kind of industrial area, and we get the first scene with the villains. Now, Catherine Hardwicke, once again, amazing director. The lead up to us actually seeing the villains was so cool because like we get this scene where you don't actually see the villain. All you see are their silhouettes. You hear them running, you hear them jumping, you hear like the attack, but you don't actually get to see them. So it builds up the suspense, which I think was amazing. I have to applaud her on that. And when I first watched Twilight, I was like 9 or 8 years old, which I know is probably too young to be watching that, but I was freaking terrified. Oh, I was so scared. So the next scene starts with Bella slipping and falling on her ass, further cementing that she is clumsy. Then we have Charlie talking to her about how there was an animal attack, which is kind of like the classic go-to in vampire shows or movies. Whenever a vampire kills someone, it's like, ooh, there was an animal attack. When it's like, really? Do animals like bite people and drain them of their blood? It's weird to me that he doesn't think it's precarious how there's like bite marks on these people that don't look like they're from animals. But maybe they fuck up the body to cover their tracks, who knows. So then we get Eric trying to ask Bella to the prom, and he gets interrupted by one of my favorite lines of the movie, which is by Mike, and he says, what's up, Arizona? How you liking the rain, girl? And she goes into class and she sees that Edward is there. And this is kind of like their first interaction. It's their first time talking to each other. He introduces himself and she asks him why he was gone. He says he was gone for a couple days for personal reasons. And this is kind of like the start of a pattern of Edward lying to her, which she does get really pissed off of eventually. Something to note is there is a little shot of the Cullen crest on his wrist, which if you look closely in the movie, they never discuss it at all, but all of the Cullens wear a Cullen crest for their like coven. Anyway, so Edward says to her to make a little bit of conversation, are you enjoying the rain? Bella laughs and says, you're asking me about the weather? So Kristen does that whole thing where she's like, I don't really like the rain. Any cold, wet thing. She then looks into his eyes and says, did you get contacts? Last time I saw you, they were black, and now they're like a golden brown. And then she bites her lip again. And Edward is like, it's the fluorescence. Bitch, come on. As if shit changes your eyes. Edward and Bella are staring at each other across from the parking lot. Then boom, this van comes out of nowhere, hurtling towards Bella, about to crush her to death. And who saves the day but Edward Cullen crushing that car and protecting his Bella? And the Cullens look pissed about it. They're like, damn, he's basically exposing himself for being a vampire. It's not looking good. I mean, then we meet Daddy Carlisle. Ooh, Mr. Carlisle. There are two daddies in this movie, Mr. Charlie and Mr. Carlisle. So then we have Rosalie and Edward arguing. Rosalie's like, 50 kids saw what happened. And Edward's like, what am I supposed to do? Let her die? Rosalie's like, this isn't just about you. This is about all of us. And this is where we get introduced to Rosalie being kind of a bitch. So then he sees Bella. She's like, how did you get to me? You were so fast. He's like, I was standing next to you. And no, you were across the parking lot. He's like, no, I wasn't. Bella, you hit your head. I think you're confused. Gaslight, girl boss, gatekeep. That's what he's doing. He's like, nuh-uh. You thought you saw something? No, you didn't. He then admits defeat and says, well, no one's gonna believe you anyway. And she's like, I wasn't gonna tell anyone. I just need to know the truth. He said, can't you just thank me and get over it? And he said, are you gonna let this go? And she said, no. She's determined. Borderline stubborn, but determined. She doesn't give up. And that's one thing I like about her. So he just tells her to prepare herself for disappointment, which I don't know what that means, whether it's like disappointment because you're not going to find out, or disappointment because he's a vampire and he hates that he's a vampire and he thinks it's a bad thing. And then we get Edward Cullen watching her sleep. It's creepy. I don't care what anyone says. I understand that he's a vampire. It's like romantic and he can jump in her window. He's breaking into her home and he's violating her space and encroaching on her vulnerability by watching her sleep. Sleeping is a very vulnerable thing. And look, I don't know if it's just because I'm an ugly sleeper. I personally snore. So when I sleep, it's kind of like a whereas she's all like, so like, she's pretty, but still like, what happens if she had pimple patches on? Like, what happens if she wasn't ready to be seen? I sleep naked. What happens if she was naked? I mean, I guess he would have liked that. But you know what? She constantly looks like she's getting a bad night's sleep. She's having nightmares. She looks uncomfortable. Maybe she doesn't have a good mattress. You know where she could get a good mattress though? Emma Sleep, which is today's sponsor. Hit it, Luke.
So about 2 years ago, I was suffering from back and neck pain from a poor mattress until I invested in a good quality one, and I've now seen the same happen to my younger sister who's been using that old mattress of mine that was causing said issues. That's why I was excited when Emma Sleep reached out to me and sent me this Comfort Sleep double mattress for my sister to use so she can too get a good night's rest. And with Emma Sleep, that's a guarantee with their mattresses that have won the top recommended mattress by Choice Australia for the past 2 years. Their mattresses regulate temperature, contain high quality foam that adapts to your body, and are designed to alleviate back pain and optimized for a deep sleep.
Good morning, Bella.
Morning.
So it's been 2 weeks since you've had your Emma Sleep mattress, and I just wanted to see how has your life changed?
It's a memory foam mattress, so I'm no longer dealing with springs in my back and no longer waking up with back pain. The temperature's regulated, so keeps you warm. It doesn't make you not worrying about being cold or hot. Having a comfortable sleep and a deep sleep, so I'm not waking up during the night or tossing and turning.
Awesome. So overall, rating out of 10 for the mattress.
10 out of 10!
If you're not in the market for a mattress though, Emma Sleep also has other great products such as memory foam pillows, a duvet, and a mattress protector and topper. I highly recommend you try Emma Sleep because they have free delivery and returns, a 100-night trial to ensure you're happy with your purchase, and a 10-year warranty to ensure your satisfaction. If you'd like to try Emma Sleep products for yourself and gain 5% off, which can be applied on top of an existing sale, then click the link in my description and use code LUKE5 at checkout.
Thanks, Emma Sleep. You the best.
So back to Edward watching Bella sleep. She turns on her lamp and he's gone. She says, and that was the first night I dreamt of Edward Cullen. Very vivid dream you'd be having. So then Edward and Bella are having a staring contest while Mike is asking Bella to prom. Then she comes up with some bullshit excuse, and you can tell she's like just coming up with it on the spot, saying that she has to go to Jacksonville. So basically she bails on Mike. And then Edward obviously was eavesdropping and is like, what's in Jacksonville? And she's like, how did you know about that? Because he's a vampire, Bella. He can hear you. Wake up. I should be easier on her. If I was having a weird experience with somebody, I don't think one of my first conclusions would be that they're a vampire. When she didn't answer his question about what's in Jacksonville, he told her that, and she said, well, you don't answer mine. You don't even say hi to me. So she's really hurt. Like, they're having this really weird relationship where it's like they keep coming back to each other and nothing's really happening. I don't even think she has a crush on him at this point. I think she's just kind of fascinated by him because what's to have a crush on? He's kind of being an asshole to her. And then she asked him how he stopped the van, and he just said he had an adrenaline rush, which I guess is kind of a good cover up. And then she trips and he's kind of mean to her again, is like, can you at least watch where you're walking? But then he apologizes for being rude all the time. And he says to her that they shouldn't be friends. And she's like, well, you should have figured that out a little bit earlier. She says something that I think is really stupid. She says, why didn't you just let the van crush me? Bitch, do you want to be dead? Do you think I regret saving you? And she's like, I can see that you do. I don't know why. He says, you don't know anything. And then we get the cute little scene where Bella drops an apple, Edward hits it with his foot, and then we get the cover of the Twilight book in his hands. I thought that was a nice touch by Catherine. And do you know that that was actually not done with like a string or anything? They just kept doing that until they got it right. And then she said, you know, your mood swings are kind of giving me whiplash, which, like, girl, I relate. Bipolar. But yeah, clearly she's getting pissed off at this point about how Edward keeps being nice to her and then mean to her. It's like, make up your fucking mind. And then he says, I only said it would be better if we weren't friends, not that I didn't want to be. And then they go back to this whole truth thing, like she wants to know the truth, and he's like, I'd rather hear your theories. She said she's considered radioactive spiders and kryptonite. And then he says, that's old superhero stuff. What if I'm the bad guy? And then she's like, you're not. I can see it's just a mask. Which is just like... So yeah, I mean, there are times where Twilight can be kind of cringe, but when you're actually watching the movie and like you just are enjoying it, you don't really pick up on it, but it's like when you look at it out of context, yeah, it's kind of cringe sometimes. And then she's like, why don't we just hang out? And then she invites him to the La Push beach because she's going with her friends. She asks if there's something wrong with that beach, and he's like, it's just a little bit crowded. Then boom, the beach is empty. But then Jacob shows up at the beach with some of his friends. One of them is like, the Cullens don't come here. Bella asks Jacob, what's this about? And then he tells her about, you know, his descendants, the Quileute people, basically came from wolves, apparently. You know, he's keeping a very hush-hush. He doesn't want to actually tell her the truth. They caught the Cullens hunting on their land, and they made a treaty that if they didn't hunt on their land and they stayed in a certain area, then they would like live amongst each other, blah, blah, blah. And then Bella's like, well, I thought the Cullens just moved here. And he's like, or just moved back. Boom, mic drop. So then we get the villains, and this is our first time actually seeing the villains. Iconic scene. I really love the contrast of the James, Victoria, Laurent clan to the Volturi, because the Volturi are this like polished, aristocratic, you know, traditional, elderly sort of government, I guess. And then, you know, they play by these rules. But then we have these three villains, because these are the villains kind of for the first three movies. The Volturi don't really come into play as much until, you know, Breaking Dawn. They are introduced in New Moon, but really, they're not really the main villain until Breaking Dawn. So we're experiencing these three villains for the first three movies, and I just love how wild they are. Like, they don't play by anyone's rules. They do what they want to do, and they don't give a shit about it. They don't give a shit about the Volturi, about people not knowing that vampires exist. They're just running amok. So, like, the Volturi eventually does intervene when it comes to the shenanigans, but at this point, the Volturi was not introduced in Twilight, so this is all we have. And the introduction of these three villains in this scene with the guy, Waylon, on the boat is iconic. He's like, who are you guys? What do you want? And then James is like, it's always the same question. Who are we? What do we want? What are we doing? And then Laurent comes in and he's like, oh, James, please, let's not play with our food. Oh, it's just so funny. Well, his death is not funny, but the whole like, let's not play with our food. I love it when vampires do that. I think it's so funny. So then we have a sunny day out in Forks, which is very rare. And then Bill is looking around and Jessica's like, he's not here. Whenever the weather's nice, the Cullens disappear. So basically their parents just take them out for a nice day of camping. Meanwhile, we know that's because they're vampires and they can't go to school because then they'd be sparkling all over the place. Oh, the horror. So then Bella goes to a bookstore to buy this book she wants, and then we get my least favorite scene in the whole movie. I understand why this scene had to be here because it was like Edward protecting her, but Bella almost gets raped by these men. It's not explicitly said, but these men are like surrounding her and being all up in her grill, and then Edward pulls up really fast in his Volvo. So he swings in and he growls at them. This is our first Edward growl. We get a lot of these later on, so be prepared. And then he's like, I should go back there and rip those guys' heads off, which like, well, it's a bit unhinged. Like, at this point she doesn't know he's a vampire, so now she's probably just thinking he's a bit of a psycho. know. And he's like, you don't know the vile, repulsive things that they were thinking. And she's like, and you do? He knows because he can read their minds. I mean, we know this. They have this cute little moment with Jessica and Angela, and Jessica and Angela like fangirling. They're in this little cafe. This is like low-key sort of their first date, like accidental date, but it's sort of their first date, so it's really cute. And in the background of this scene, we have Never Think by Robert Pattinson playing. Now, I'm not sure if you guys know this, but Robert Pattinson is actually a very talented singer. He sang 2 songs in the Twilight film. I really wish Robert put out more music because his music is unlike any other music I've ever heard. It's hard to even describe, just look it up on YouTube, but it's amazing and it's softly playing in the background. So they order some food and Bella's the only one eating and she asks why Edward's not, and he says because he's on a special diet, which is funny because we do know that his diet is in fact very special. And she asks him how he knew where she was and he doesn't want to tell her, so she gets up and is about to leave and he's like, don't leave. And she's like, did you follow me? And he says, I feel very protective of you. And she says, so you followed me? He said, I was trying to keep a distance unless you needed my help. And then I heard what those lowlifes were thinking. And she's like, you heard what they were thinking? You read minds. And he says, I can read every mind in this room apart from yours. And then we have a moment that I love. In hindsight, it's kind of cringy, but I love it. So Edward says to Bella, I don't have the strength to stay away from you anymore. And she says, then don't. Oh, my heart. I fucking love that scene. And then they're driving home and they go to both touch the heater and they accidentally touch hands and she gasps because his hands are so fucking cold. And then they go to the police station and there's like a little bit of a scene here about Waylon because that was Charlie's friend and he died. I think it's another animal attack. And then what's really weird is Bella sees Waylon's dead body and then she gets like a flashback to seeing Edward like looking at his cold, pale skin because the body is pale and cold because Edward is in fact dead because he's a vampire. And then Bella does her research on the vampires and she's really putting 2 and 2 together. She's realizing he's super fast, he's super quick, his hands are cold. And then she gets this kind of like this like dream scene, and we see this a couple times in the movie where Catherine Hardwicke puts in a scene that's not actually canon, like it's not actually happening, but it's like this really artistic scene, Bella lying on this couch and Edward going to drink her blood. And I just really love that kind of stuff. I really wish they included more of that in the other movies, like kind of a bit more of like a dreamscape sort of situation. Then she gets to school and she wants to confront him, so they walk into the woods and we get just about the most iconic scene in the movie. So then they're in the forest and Bella starts to call Edward out. She's like, you're impossibly fast and strong. Your skin is pale white and ice cold. Your eyes change color and sometimes you talk like you're from a different time. You don't ever eat or drink anything. You don't go out in the sunlight. And then she asks the question, how old are you? And he says, 17. He's all like, how long have you been 17? He's like, a while. She's like, I know what you are. And then he goes, say it. And then she's like, vampire. He asks her, what do they eat? And she says, you won't hurt me. But he starts dragging her like quite aggressively by the arm, like it's a bit much. And he's dragging her through the forest and says, you need to see what I look like in the sunlight. This part gave me shivers. Like this would have freaked her the fuck out, but would have been so exciting too. He puts her on his back and starts running up the hill, vamp speed. She's like, what the fuck? And he takes her up to the top and says, this is why we don't show ourselves in the sunlight. People would know we're different. And then we have Edward Cullen in his sparkly glory. How do you guys feel about the vampires sparkling in Twilight? What do you think? Because traditionally vampires can't go in the sunlight because they like burn up. But yeah, he sparkles. And she says it's beautiful like diamonds. And he says the classic line, it's the skin of a killer, Bella, which I love how dramatic Edward is. He says he's the world's most dangerous predator and everything about him invites you in. And then he has a scene which I think is so funny. He's like, as if you could outrun me. And then he like runs really fast, as if you could fight me. And then he pulls a branch with roots out of the ground. And then he's like, I'm designed to kill. Like the whole thing is just cringy, but when you're watching it, you're like very in it. This part I don't get. He says, I've killed people before. And she says, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm sorry. I think that Bella's reaction to him being a vampire is so interesting. Like, she does not really seem to be that fazed by it. And then he says, I wanted to kill you. I never wanted to taste a human's blood so much in my life, which I would be creeped out by that. She's all like, I trust you. And he's like, don't. It's getting rough out here for the girlie. She's really risking her life for him. So then he talks about how him and his family are different. They only hunt on animals. They've learned to control their thirst. But he says, your scent, it's like a drug to me. You're like my own personal brand of heroin, which I thought was kind of weird. I guess I get it because like heroin is like a really addictive drug. So it's like if you give in, it's like hard to hold back. So, and then Bella says, why did you hate me so much when we met? And he said, only for making me want you so badly. Okay, she can't help it that her blood tastes deliciously, scrumptiously actually good. Also, why does her blood taste better than other people's bloods? Why does it smell better? I wonder what's so special about her blood. He can't read her mind and he needs to know what she's thinking. And he like kind of pins her against a rock and she's like, now I'm afraid. He's being very like dominant and aggressive with his body language throughout the scene. He's really letting out that Dom Daddy energy. But then Bella says, I'm not afraid of you. I'm only afraid of losing you. Which like in the moment you're watching it, you're like, wow, that's so romantic. But then you take yourself out of the movie and you think to yourself, really, you guys, like, you don't know each other that well. You haven't known each other that long. Like, how are you already afraid of losing him? Like, it doesn't seem feasible. And I feel like this sometimes in movies and TV shows where I feel like people fall in love too quickly. But who knows? Maybe when you know, and it's love at first sight. And when I'm watching the movie, I don't give a shit. I love it. I eat that shit up. And then he says, you don't know how long I've waited for you. So clearly Edward's been living the single life for a while and he finally feels like he's met someone he can fall in love with. This part is like, kind of cringe. Like, it doesn't really matter which way you swing it. Like, outside of the movie, when I'm looking at it in this context, or when I'm watching the movie, I find these lines cringe. So Edward says, so the lion fell in love with the lamb. And Bella says, what a stupid lamb. And he says, what a sick, masochistic lion. I could never get with that line. I always found it cringy. That's just me. I know I keep saying it, but this has to be my favorite, like, romance scene of the film. We just get, like, this kind of scene of them laying down in a meadow, talking to each other, looking at each other. The sun comes over them, and Edward sparkles and there's just beautiful music playing. Like, it's honestly so gorgeous. The cinematography in this movie and the music, put it together, magnifico. The scene, it does something to my soul. It does something to me. And then Bella is in her room. She's talking about how she doesn't know how dominant is that part of Edward that thirsts for my blood. But then she says she's unconditionally and irrevocably in love with him. It's interesting that she like already feels like she unconditionally loves him, because unconditionally loving someone is like a big deal, you know? It means like no matter what they do, you're still there. That's my man, and I'm gonna stick beside him. They haven't even kissed yet at this point. Let's keep that in mind. But obviously it's hard for him to kiss her because the thirst for blood is too much. And then we get the scene of Edward and Bella arriving at high school together, showing off their newfound relationship and coupling and making it public. And it's a pretty cool scene, and the Cullens don't seem too happy about it. Then we have kind of a Q&A between Edward and Bella where she's kind of learning about the vamps. And then Bella asks if someone can only be turned if they're dying, and Edward says that's just Carlisle. He'd never do this to someone if he didn't have another choice. So really he's kind of hitting home that being a vampire is not something that he would choose for himself, but because he was dying from the Spanish flu at the time, Carlisle turned him. He says it was really painful, that the venom was excruciating, but what Carlisle did was much harder. When we taste human blood, a sort of frenzy begins, and it's almost impossible to stop. And then he gives us insight into what it's like for them to only be living off of animal blood. He says it's like if a human only lived off of tofu. He says it keeps you strong, but never fully satisfied. Not like tasting your blood. That's pretty creepy that he said that. Like it's like, girl, she probably is there like, yeah, I can't help it that I'm delicious. Please don't kill me. So then Edward takes Bella to go ahead and meet his family, and we get to see the Cullens house for the first time, which I love this house. I've built it in The Sims a couple times because I just think it's so beautiful with like all the glass windows and stuff. So Rosalie and Emmett and Carlisle and Esme are in the kitchen cooking some Italian dish for Bella, and Rosalie says, is she even Italian? And Emmett's like, her name's Bella. Which is funny because like my sister's name is Bella and we are not Italian. And then they say, here comes the human, and Rosalie's like, get a whiff of that. So clearly that blood smell is really just kind of filling up their nostrils. And Edward says Bella's already eaten, and we get the iconic moment of Rosalie crushing the salad bowl. Edward's like, just ignore Rosalie. I do. She's all like, yeah, let's just keep pretending like this isn't dangerous for all of us. And Bella's all like, I would never tell anyone, otherwise I would become the meal. And then we get the iconic scene of Alice and Jasper coming in off of the branch and jumping down. So Alice goes straight in for a hug, and to really put the cherry on top of that creepy cupcake, she says, oh, you do smell good. Edward is like, ugh, and Alice is like, it's okay, Bella and I are going to be great friends. Could you imagine someone saying that when you just meet them? And then we find out that Jasper's their newest vegetarian, and he's giving her the eyes like, I want to eat you. And Alice is like, it's okay, Jasper, you won't hurt her. Which Edward's just like, all right, I think I'm just gonna go take Bella on a tour for the rest of the house. And then we see the graduation caps. Edward's like, we matriculate a lot. And something I didn't notice before, which I noticed in this rewatch, was Bella was like, oh, that must suck going to high school so many times. And he's like, well, the younger we are when we go somewhere, the longer we can stay there before people start to notice we're not aging. And then we see Edward's room, which is so Edward. It's got like books everywhere. It's got music. Bella notices that there's no bed, and he's like, like, I don't sleep. Imagine not sleeping. Like, somehow that seems very depressing to me. Like, there's really no defining separation between the days. It kind of just all blurs together. Oh, and then we get one of my favorite parts of the movie, which you guys probably weren't careful. Bella checks out the music and she's like noticing it, and Edward's like, it's Debussy. Which I know is probably some name for like the composer or something, but if you know what a bussy is, you know why that's funny. Do not Google a bussy, okay? Trust me. And then Edward starts trying to get Bella to dance, and she's all like, I can't dance. And he's like, I could always make you. And she's all like, I'm not scared of you. And he's like, you really shouldn't have said that. And then we get one of the most iconic scenes. I feel like it's kind of a broken record at this point. But he puts her on his back and jumps towards a tree and says the iconic line, hold on tight, spider monkey. And then he just starts climbing trees and jumping all over the place. And it's honestly just really, really cool. Could you imagine getting to experience that? Bella's like, this isn't real. This kind of stuff just doesn't exist. And he's like, it does in my world, which is cool because he's like bringing her into his world. And then we get one of those other scenes, which is like one of those scenes that doesn't actually happen in the movie. It's just kind of like for that artistic effect. And it's Edward playing a piano while Bella chills on a chase lounge and listens to him. The lighting coming in with like the kind of like the fog or the mist. I just think it's so beautiful. And he plays her Bella's lullaby, which is a beautiful song that I sometimes listen to when I can't fall asleep. And then Edward just randomly appears in Bella's bedroom one night and she's like, how'd you get in here? And he's like, the window. She's like, you do that a lot? And he's all like, just the past couple of months. I like watching you sleep. It's kind of fascinating to me. Because that's not creepy. I'm sorry, no matter which way you swing it, some motherfucker, I don't care what type of situation we got going on, you sneak into my bedroom without my knowledge watching me sleep. Once again, I am an ugly sleeper. But even if I wasn't, that would bother me. The fact that she's like so unfazed by it is beyond me. And then Edward's like, I want to try one thing. Just stay very still. Don't move. And then he goes in for a kiss. And this kiss, it's not even like a big deal when you look at it as an objective point of view. Like they're just in her bedroom kissing. But in my opinion, one of the best cinematic kisses we've ever got because of the build-up. This entire movie they haven't kissed because if he kisses her, he's gonna want that blood. But at this point, he's going in for it because he just can't wait any longer. And the build-up of them going in towards for the kiss, like the breathing, and then when you get the actual kiss, it's so satisfying. And you can just tell that he is struggling so much, but he also just wants it so bad. And then he starts to get horny and like pushes her back against the bed, really going in for that makeout. And then all of a sudden he just like pushes himself against the wall, and Bella's all like, oh, I'm sorry. And he's like, I'm stronger than I thought. And she's like, I wish I could say the same because you know she want that vamp dick. I'm just saying. Do you think if they hadn't drank blood for a while, they can't get an erection? That'd be funny. He's like, I can't ever lose control with you. She's all like, hey, don't go. And then they just kind of like lay in bed talking for hours, and he stays there with her while she falls asleep. And it's honestly really cute. And then Bella wants Charlie to meet Edward, and we get that funny part where Charlie like glocks his gun, let's just say that. And then Edward's like, Bella might be out too late. She's just gonna go play baseball with my family. Charlie scoffs. He's like, Bella, baseball, what? Because we've established with the volleyball scene that Bella doesn't really do sports. And then Edward says, I'll take good care of her, I promise, which is funny given everything that's about to ensue. Charlie's like, you still got that pepper spray? Oh, that's pretty funny. And Edward says that there's a thunderstorm coming, which is the only time they can play. And we find out that the reason that is because they are so strong and fast that they make such loud noises when they hit the ball with the bat. They need the thunder to cover up the sound. And then all of a sudden, our villains come into play. James, Victoria, and Laurent come gliding in. Edward's all like, I'm so sorry I brought you here. And then, you know, it's getting a little bit tense. But all they want to do is just kind of like play a little game with them. They just want to play a little baseball. Why not? And then Carla's like, a couple of us were leaving anyway. You can take their place. So Edward and Bella go to leave, and then the wind blows. Edward told Bella to put her hair down so that her neck was covered, but the wind blew her hair. So the smell of her blood from her carotid artery wafts across the field. And James gets a whiff, and he's like, you brought a snack. And then all of a sudden, they're just like having a growl. Something I think is funny about the vampires in Twilight is they growl. They growl at each other. I guess it's animalistic, it's creature monster-like. I don't love it. I'll be honest, I'm not really a fan of the growling, but you know what, it's there. Bella's all freaked out. She's like, oh my god, is he coming after me? Edward's like, we gotta get you out of here. She's like, no, what about Charlie? He's my dad. We need to go back. Edward's like, we can't. James, this is his obsession. He's a tracker. Really freaking her out. But she's like, no, it's my dad. We're going back, which I love because I love Charlie. However, what I don't love, Bella has to kind of like have a fight with him so that Charlie will let her go. So she's basically saying she broke up with Edward. It's a fight. She just needs to get out of here. She doesn't want to be in Forks anymore because of him. She's going back to her mom. Oh, by the way, James is listening to all of this. Charlie's not having a bar of it. He's like, just sleep on it. If you still want to go in the morning, I will drive you to the airport myself. She's like, no, I just gotta get out of here. And he's like, you know, Bella, I'm sorry. I know things haven't been fun around here. I can change that. And Bella's like what? Like watch baseball on the flat screen, eat dinner every night? That's you, Dad. That's not me. Sorry, I just get kind of emotional. He's like, I just got you back. And she says, and you know, if I don't get out now, I'm just gonna be stuck here like mom. And then she leaves. Heartbreaking scene. I'm a Charlie stan. So that really hurt me. And Bella said to Edward that was what her mother said to Charlie when she was leaving him. All them a while, broke his motherfucking heart. And then Laurent goes to the Cullens' house and he's just there to give them a warning. He also says not to underestimate Victoria. So Alice and Jasper are gonna go with Bella to Phoenix to keep her safe. Meanwhile, Rosalie and Carlisle and Esme and Edward are going to distract James by wearing Bella's jackets and rubbing her scent all over the forest. Rosalie's kind of against this at first because she's like, what is she to me? But Carlisle's like, she's with Edward now. She's part of the family, so she eventually comes around. Really, we're not loving Rosalie at this point, but you know what? It is what it is. Bella's freaking out. She's like, if anything happens to us, oh my god, I swear to god. Edward's like, there's 7 of us and 2 of them. We got this. We will later find out that they do not got this. James is out in the woods sniffing like a little truffle pig. He realizes that Bella's scent is off and he changes course. So Alice sees that. All of a sudden she gets another vision. She draws the vision and it's all these mirrors and Bella realizes it's her old ballet studio. And then James calls Bella from Bella's mom's home phone. Bella's like, Mom, like, what are you doing home? James is all, it was too easy for Victoria to find your address at Forks High. They really should protect your records. The voice of Bella's mom is like, Bella, where are you? So Bella thinks that James has her mother. He tells her to meet her at the ballet studio. Bella, like an idiot, goes and meets James at the ballet studio. She's all like, oh my god, like I never given much thought to how I would die, but dying in the place of someone I love seems like a good way to go. Can't bring herself to regret the decisions that led her to be face to face with death because they also brought her to Edward. Which, like, fun, but you've been dating for what, a couple months? Was it really worth it if you're gonna die? She checks if she has her pepper spray, as if that's gonna do anything, and she hears her mom in the ballet studio calling out to her. And then she goes to a closet and it's a TV with a home video of Bella when she was a toddler with her mother. Bella sees James. It's super creepy because there's like mirrors everywhere and she realizes that, you know, her mom's not even there. Imagine how like fucking stupid you would feel falling into a trap like that. I probably would have called Phil, the mom's husband, and asked it where she was, and then you could have verified that she was with him. But no, Bella chose to believe that James had her and she fell into his trap. James is really creepy. He's like getting all up in her grill. Personal bubble doesn't exist in this scenario. And he says he's gonna make a little film with her. And he pulls out a camcorder and starts trying to taunt her, antagonize her, and Bella sprays him in the face with pepper spray. She tries to run. He's a vampire. Obviously that's not gonna work. Jumps in the air, like full on flies basically, and like pushes her against a wall and she hits her head. He says, well, Edward shouldn't have kept you this fragile little human. It's too bad he didn't have the strength to turn you. And then he snaps her fucking leg, like just full on, like this guy is a savage. He is not only, you know, after the hunt, he's playing with his food, he's torturing her. It's honestly a lot to watch, and like 8-year-old me watching this probably had nightmares. And the fact that he's filming it, like, I don't know, it just makes the whole thing very creepy. Like, but then Edward comes in, swoops in, grabs James, they start fighting, and this part's really dumb. So Edward grabs Bella and jumps up to try and, like, you know, run away with her, but James pulls Edward down and Bella falls and rolls in glass, and a shard of glass gets all up in her leg, and she's bleeding like a lot, okay? And this is like the first time we've seen blood in the movie, and Bella's just at this point just lying on the ground, and James goes up to her and bites her on the wrist. He starts to try and drink her blood, but Edward rips him off of her. But what we know about the venom is that it's excruciating. So this is the part where, like, Bella's just on the ground convulsing in pain. You know, Edward grabs James, fly towards the ground, and floorboards start to rip up. This battle. Ooh. And then Edward bites a chunk out of James's neck. Alice goes up to Bella. She touches her blood and then for some reason puts it up against her nose. Maybe it was too hard to resist. And then Alice snaps James's neck while Carlisle is saying that Bella's femoral artery has been severed. She's losing too much blood. And she's like, no, my head, it's burning. And Carlisle's all like, you have a choice. You could let the change happen. But Edward's like, no. And then Alice is like, it's gonna happen, Edward, I've seen it. So she's seen Bella in the future being a vampire. But Carlisle's like, it doesn't have to end that way. And he says you could suck the venom right out. But Edward's like, you know, I won't be able to stop. Carlisle says, then find the will to stop. Now, Carlisle has turned 6 vampires. So he could have definitely done this for Bella. He could have sucked out the venom. He probably has a lot more restraint than Edward. But I think as a father, he was trying to teach him a lesson, which, like, weird opportunity to take this as a learning lesson. Like, the girl is dying. But lo and behold, Edward goes to suck out the blood because Carla says she only has minutes left. Edward actually kind of can't help himself because obviously it's blood. And Carla's like, her blood is clean, you're killing her. Now, what I think is really interesting is Kristen's acting in this scene. Her facial expressions, they tell a story. Like, you see the point point she's in pain, right? And then you see the point where she was relieved because Edward had sucked the venom out. And then you see the point where she's like drifting her way. Like Kristen did such an amazing job. And she was 17 when this movie was filmed. You can see in like the life coming out of her eyes. She's dying because Edward's draining her. And then Carla's like, find the will to stop. And then we get this beautiful montage of Edward and Bella. It's kind of like a dreamscape. And the song that is playing while this is all happening is Let Me Sign by Robert Pattinson. Let me sign. It's such a beautiful song. Listen to it. And then it cuts to Bella in the hospital with the voiceover of Bella saying, death is easy, life is harder, which we know the Tumblr girlies back then were loving that. So the story that they kind of come up with for her family is that Bella, while running away, like the Cullens went to come and find her and bring her back to Forks, and she went to the hotel room and she tripped down a flight of stairs and fell through a glass window and lost a lot of blood because of that. Pretty good cover-up story, actually. It explains the glass, it explains the broken leg, and it explains the loss of blood. One thing I'm not sure if it explains is the bite mark on her arm, because we see in the later movies that she has a scar from this, so I wonder how they covered that up. I guess maybe they might have put a bandage on her. The mom's like, Edward's been here, like he sleeps here, he stayed here for you. But we know vampires don't sleep, so he's just pretending to sleep. When the mother leaves, Bella says to Edward, I'm alive because of you. And he says, no, you're in here because of me. Which is like dead ass true, but she doesn't really see it that way. He says, I thought I wasn't gonna be able to stop and you have to go to Jacksonville so I can't hurt you. And Bella's like freaking out because of this. She actually just can't get the words, and I think it was impeccable acting from Kristen. She's all like, you can't leave me, we can't be apart. And Edward's like, I'm here. And she's like, you can't say stuff like that to me, ever. And he said, where else am I gonna go? It was weird how you did a full 180. Like 1 minute you're like, I need to go, and then he's like, no, I'll stay. Once again with the whiplash situation. And then we get Edward and Charlie waiting for Bella to come down as they're gonna go to prom. Really awkward, there's just like silence, they're not even talking to each other. Bella comes down and, you know, she looks all beautiful. And Jacob comes to Bella while she's waiting at the prom. Edward's parking the car. And he said that he comes with a message from his dad, and his dad wants her to break up with his boyfriend and that they'll be watching. As if that's not creepy as fuck. And Edward says once Jacob leaves to Bella, I leave you for 2 seconds and the wolves descend. She laughs. Meanwhile, what she doesn't know is her best friend is about to turn into a motherfucking wolf. We get into the prom, and I noticed this, which I didn't notice watching the movies when I was younger, is when they walk into prom and it shows all the people dancing. There's this one shot that shows the back of a woman with red hair, and you probably just think it's another woman, but that's actually Victoria. She was hiding in plain sight, and they didn't even know it. It's so random, but I really like this part when Bella sees Jessica. Jessica was talking about how she liked this dress and it made her boobs look good. So then Bella's all like to her, like, which I thought was funny because we don't really get many like funny moments with Bella, so when we do, I kind of like, I cling to that. So then Edward and Bella are dancing on the little starry night in the little gazebo. She's all like, why didn't you just let the venom spread? I could be like you right now. And he's like, you don't want this. And she's like, I want you. It's very teen heartthrob, you know, it's very forbidden love. We love to see it. He's all like, I'm not gonna end your life for you. She's like, I'm dying every single day. And then she's like, Alice said she saw me like you. Edward's like, her vision's changed. But Bella's like, they change based on people's choices. I've decided. And he's like, so that's what you dream about, becoming a monster? So we really know that Edward clearly struggles with being a vampire. But she's like, I just dream about being with you forever. And then Edward goes into her neck. She's like, oh my god, is he gonna bite me? Which, like, it would make no sense for him to bite you at the prom because the venom, like, you're gonna convulse and have a freak out on the ground and everyone's gonna see it. It wouldn't make sense. But he just ends up kissing her on the neck. He says, is it not enough just to have a long, happy life with me? And she says, yeah, for now. And Flightless Bird is playing in the background and it's really beautiful. And then they have their final kiss for the movie and it zooms out and we get the back of this woman's head. Who could it be? But none other than Victoria, which is so good because it really sets up what's happening in the next movies because we know she's about to come for some vengeance. That's pretty much the end of Twilight. Honestly, my favorite movie in the franchise. I love Twilight. It's such a dreamscape. So beautiful. The music, the cinematography, the acting. I love it so much. I really can't fault it.
Actually, I changed my mind. I can fault the movie. After watching it for pleasure, watching it for this video, taking about 1 million screenshots, filming it, and editing it for over a week and a half, I have noticed a few problematic things about Bella and Edward's relationship that could pertain to real life, even though the relationship is kind of embedded in the fact that he is a vampire. But if we suspend our disbelief and look at it with a more analytical eye, there are some issues. The first one being the whole hate to love trope with Edward treating Bella horribly because of something she cannot control, like the taste of her blood. I see this in real life with, like, let's say a person questioning their sexuality, in love with someone of the same gender. They kind of treat them badly because they want them, but they feel like they can't have them. Or any other relationship that some sort of forbidden love for whatever reason. I also think that they fell in love way too quickly and trusted each other way too quickly. Yes, I feel like you should be open to love, but you should also keep your walls up a little bit just to make sure that you're protecting yourself and not getting too vulnerable with someone too quickly, because that leads you to getting potentially hurt. I also think that the relationship can be borderline codependent. This whole feeling of like, you cannot live with the other person, or you want to die for the other person. We see this in New Moon, where Edward actually like almost commits suicide because he thinks Bella's dead, and Bella puts her life in danger for Edward. I think that their relationship is a bit codependent, and in the real world you need to be able to live your own life and not rely on the other person for every ounce of your happiness. So yeah, those are the issues that I see with their relationship, but other than that, I do love their love story. I think it is cute, but I can't ignore those issues, and you guys let me know what you think down below, because yes, I do think that this movie kind of romanticizes somewhat of a toxic relationship, because growing up I genuinely thought that this was what love is, and through my experiences I realized that this is not really what love is typically like, and if it is, it's probably not the healthiest form of it.
Guys, let me know what you thought about the first movie in the comments down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the post notifications bell so you don't miss my videos of the next movies, which I'm excited to film. As always, my social media is linked down below, as well as my second channel, podcast, merch, and cameo. Thank you so much to Emma Sleep for sponsoring this video, and guys, make sure you check that description. And without further ado, thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you in my next one, and I hope that you have a great day or night wherever you're in the world. Bye!